Right. Whilst we wait for any stragglers, Mark, are you okay? You okay kicking off?
I'm ready.
Fine. Excellent. So everyone, thank you very much for joining. Much appreciated. We'll try to keep this to 45 minutes or thereabouts, probably under, depending on how long the Q&A will last. But I wanted just to give you an overview of what to expect from this. So we'll be covering a few bits and pieces. There'll be some slides around the rationale behind the smart viewing concept and why we're looking to bring it into the flex space market. I'll go through a few numbers of real life lead flow and viewings within a particular location so that you can get an understanding of how lead flow turns into appointments and how that has an impact on us as an industry in terms of time. Mark will have a few minutes to go through insights from the real life impact of smart viewings as it has had in the residential sector, which is where it is currently very active. We'll then spend a few minutes just showing you a video of exactly what the interface looks like in real time, and I'll have a bit of commentary running alongside that. And then we'll have a bit of a Q&A with regards to any questions that you might have. So hopefully it should be short and sharp, and to the point. There should be a Q&A button at the bottom of your panel. I'm sure you're used to attending webinars over the last few months. So if you have a question, if you could pop it into the Q&A section, that would be grand. Natasha, who's logged on alongside us, will be able to collate those, and we will address them as things wrap up. If there's any issues with the Q&A button, just put them straight into the chat, and Tash will monitor both areas, and we'll get to the questions accordingly. So to kick off, wanted to introduce both myself and Mark. I'm Business Development Director at Flexioffices. My role within the company is effectively to look after all the processes apart from inbound sales. So anything from marketing to paid online advertising to sort of creative R&D projects such as the smart viewing one fall under my jurisdiction. I've been with the company 16 years now, so I've seen it develop from a four-person company to what it is now, and it's certainly been interesting living through the COVID experience over the last few months. But like many, I do share the belief that it's going to impact our industry positively, and I think if anything, it's accelerated the process towards the sort of interface that we're going to be talking about here quite a long way the last few months. Mark, do you want to take a couple of seconds to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Michael. So I'm Mark. I'm the CEO of Smart Viewing. We are a property tech, still qualified as startup. We're part of a large accelerator program called Barclays Techstars, and we have been now running Smart Viewing for 3 years, very successfully in the residential space, and we think that the very concept of remote viewing is very relevant as well for other industries. The flexi space is among one of them, and I think it would be a very relevant deployment for this industry and to bring more efficiency as well to this sector.
Fabulous. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Michael.
So just to sort of kick off, I wanted to talk about what smart viewing actually is. In a nutshell, it's quite a simple concept. It's a two-way video link between the operator and the customer, which allows you to share in a central interface either a 360-degree virtual walkthrough, if one is available, or indeed static images or pre-recorded video. And you can interact with the client via video and voice at the same time. So it's in effect an online guided tour. It combines the benefits of a video call with the benefits of a 360 walkthrough in a single interface without the need to flick between screens. And the journey towards this point had really started about a year or so ago. Myself and Mark have been collaborating on this probably best part of a year now. So it predates the arrival of COVID, but the where it started was from a consideration of the sheer volume of first viewings that flex space market has to cater for on a day-to-day basis. And alongside that, an appreciation of what the first viewing tends to address for the consumer. And primarily within the flex space market, it tends to be an exploration of whether spaces are suitable to that client's requirement. And a large proportion of that is aesthetic. In other words, does the space meet our needs and our wants from a look and feel perspective? Are we comfortable here? Is this space us? So with that in mind, we wanted to see whether the first viewing had scope to be digitized in a way, because the first viewings are time sensitive, and more often than not lead to second, third, sometimes fourth viewings, where further decision makers in the process get involved, and the negotiation process gathers momentum after the initial list of properties leads to a short list. So that was the thinking behind starting our collaboration. And we wanted to look at actually just how many of these first viewings are there, and you know what is the relationship between inbound leads and the number of viewings that they generate. So we wanted to have a look at a fairly enclosed cluster of properties from which to gather data, and we chose SW1 Victoria as a location. We analysed the 12-month period over the course of last year. And the findings were quite interesting. Over that period of time, just under 700 unique leads came into Flexioffices, looking specifically for that location, 690 of them. Of those, of those, just under 300 turned into viewings, so 298 leads turned into viewings. But interestingly, those 298 leads that turned to viewings became just under 1,800 individual first appointments. And the reason for that is because typically each customer viewed 6 properties within a single viewing schedule as their first experience for viewings in that particular area. Just over 1,500 of those completed, and just under 250 of those cancelled or no-showed. Incidentally, this led to a total of 66 deals, but only 30 deals in the cluster. So what we're seeing here is that customers that inquire in a particular location are certainly swayed towards being cross-sold into other locations where they end up taking space eventually. But the primary statistic that really stood out for me was the 300 leads to 1,800 initial appointments. We wanted to see exactly what that looked like in terms of time invested. And we assumed that each viewing would take between 45 minutes and an hour. Although I am aware that broker-led viewings, as I'm sure you will appreciate, are a bit more time sensitive, simply because we tend to try and allocate more appointments into a single viewing schedule, primarily because of the fact that the customer wants to cover as much ground as possible. So in many respects, that works both against the provider and against the customer, in that they have less time to consider a building before they are rushed to go to another viewing. I'm sure everyone has had this issue, and it's been a constant source of irritation to many. But based on 45 minutes per viewing, we're talking 1,400 hours, or just over 55 days of total viewing time, and in excess of a calendar week in effective cancellations and no-shows. the cost there, you know, we looked at it, you know, arbitrary £20 an hour in terms of cost sustained. But when you take all of these figures and then multiply them by the number of core brokerages that, you know, deal with significant volumes, all of a sudden we're looking at thousands and thousands of hours and you know, thousands of potentially wasted hours. Our expectation around the virtual viewing piece, if we were to digitalize the first viewing, is that each one will take between 10 and 15 minutes in total. The reality is it could take less, but as you'll see, the interface does allow you to engage with the customer and show them multiple properties at the same time. So 10 to 15 minutes, I think, is a fair assumption of how long it will take. It can be conducted through a computer, a tablet, or a phone. So the location of the person viewing or the person showing the space, it doesn't really matter. Therefore, we do expect significant time savings, both in terms of actual time walking around first viewings, but also in terms of any cancellations that might be incurred in that respect. The other big consideration is being present on the viewing schedule. And again, this for me, this is something that, working for a brokerage for, you know, the best part of 20 years, I'm very conscious of how we arrange viewing schedules. Sometimes, especially when there is a high concentration of viable properties for the customer to see, the only thing preventing us from booking them all is time. Conversely, the customer wants to see as many as possible because they want to be able to choose the ones that work for them best. This results in a situation where sometimes, even though space is available, the building may not necessarily be shown. So we were wondering, how can we overcome that? Because the first viewing is primarily an aesthetic experience, showing the customer more properties will not necessarily dilute your ability to be in front of the client for a physical viewing down the line. So this is more about how do we make sure that you're present. And that's the whole reasoning behind launching the interface. Mark, do you want to take a few moments just to talk about how this actually impacts real life?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And to echo what you just said, on the residential side, because originally this is very much the angle we started, discussing the relevance of the smart viewing platform for the flexi space. What we have seen is actually statistically the number of viewings actually increases when a smart viewing is actually done, because it is very much a vetting tool for the consumer. But to step back and to talk first about very sort of a high level number on the residential space, and I'm sure that will hopefully echo for the flexi space. So last year you had about 80 million leads generated by the 3/2 main largest portals, Zoopla and Rightmove. Those triggered about 60 million physical viewings, and the way we end up with this number is very simple. On average, a real estate agent goes about 25 times to close a sales transaction and about 8 times to close a letting deal. So on a blended basis, real estate agent went 60 million times to close around 4.5 million transactions last year in the UK. Again, you can apply a cost to that. For an industry that generated about 7 billion in fees last year, the cost of conducting physical viewings correspond to about 1 billion. So it's a significant number that impacts directly the bottom line. Now the real question is how, for the residential space, how does that really impact in the real life? If we go on the KPI slide, Michael, please. You're in charge. Thank you. What we see is quite interesting. So we have seen that to close the same number of deals, for the letting space, we had 3.3 times fewer physical viewings than it would have been the case without smart viewing. It's slightly less so for sales, and the rationale for that is that a lot of the letting was actually done by people who had difficulties traveling, as opposed to the people who are buying. And on average, people are buying within 6 miles radius from where they live. What is interesting as well is that for a real estate agent, what is interesting is that it's a very interesting tool to sell to their own clients, to the vendor, because they can basically show the properties more often than they would have done in the physical way. And lastly, obviously, is really, and this is, I think, way more relevant for you than the speed to offer, is really the savings. Because what we are basically saying in those KPIs is that smart viewing does not replace physical viewings. They are just making the physical viewings more relevant. And the time to closing is better, and the savings are quite dramatic for the real estate agents that have started deploying smart viewing. And this is very much the sort of KPIs that I think will eventually echo very well with the flexi space, because at the end of the day, this is a very similar principle whereby you have lead generation, lead qualification, and physical viewings, contract. So the process is exactly the same. And what we're intending to do is really to make this platform as flexi space friendly as possible. And this is why we have started working with Michael and Flexioffices, because we think it's a very relevant tool for this industry. I'm afraid that's it.
Thank you, Marc. So what we will do is we're going to, as opposed to continuing with loads and loads of slides, we'll actually move towards showing you what this interface looks like in practice. But what we'll then do is talk about exactly how it will evolve over time. So what we've got right now is the stock version, which is about to be upgraded, but we'll talk about that after we've shown you how the actual process works. And we'll talk a little bit about how we envision the future of this developing. So if you bear with me, I'm just going to change screens. So what we have here is it's a pre-recorded video. We realized that doing a live demonstration was impossible because computers don't allow you to have 2 video inputs unless there's some wizardry I'm unaware of. So because the smart viewing involves video, we pre-recorded one earlier, and we can walk you through that whilst I explain a little bit about how it works. For each operator that uses the interface, you will receive a username and login. So this will be your own interface. It's not something that you'll need to do via Flexioffices. Access will be unrestricted. Our involvement in this is to host the content. So as and when you guys, when you have 3D viewings, when you have images, when you have videos, we would offer the hosting for that, which will in turn feed this platform. But once you get a login, you can use it as you wish. There are no restrictions. Once you log in, you will have the option to either start an instant viewing, which is basically when you have a customer on the phone and you want to show them around the building straight away, if they are so inclined, or you have the option to schedule a viewing in advance, which will create a diary entry and send regular reminders to the customer about that viewing being scheduled. This entire interface is very straightforward. It's an online resource, so that there are no apps to download. There is nothing that prevents somebody from simply clicking a link and being connected to the virtual viewing. So it's been designed to be as seamless as possible. When you start an instant viewing, you will be in a position to choose which building you want to show. And you will then have the option to invite an applicant either via a text message if they're using a mobile phone, or via an email if they are using an email. Once you start an instant viewing, the interface itself will launch, and you can click Start a Virtual Tour to commence the sharing of screens and the 3D walkthrough for that particular building between you and the client in question. At the moment, as things stand right here, there is no video connection between you and the client just yet. You need to initiate that as a secondary step. So you would scroll down to where the applicant is listed and click the little green button. That then opens up a video for you and sends the client a link. They can accept it, and as you can see in the top left-hand corner, you can see the client connected to the video interface. Now this is a Matterport viewing, so you can navigate it by clicking on the various waypoints and move around. Obviously, what you cannot hear is the audio connection between you and the client, but it is there. So they can ask questions, they can ask you to back up, they can ask you to pan around. And if you had only access to images as opposed to a 3D walkthrough, you'll be able to scroll through a variety of images, which can include floor plans and the like, to take the client through slide by slide the details of your property. The interesting part of this experience is that if you have a portfolio of multiple properties, you have the option to change between one property and another whilst the client is in the viewing with you. So you'd simply click on Show Another Property, search for it and select it from the list, and then the interface will seamlessly shift from showing one building to showing another building. You will also be able, obviously we're only showing the Matterports here, but if you have a variety of media, such as a 3D walkthrough or individual images or a pre-recorded video, you will have the ability to switch between those media during a single viewing. So you can go from static images to a pre-recorded video to a 3D walkthrough at your leisure. And that is, in effect, pretty much it. I mean, there is no, it's not black magic. It's fairly straightforward. The concept behind it is the splicing of a video call with a 3D tour. So it's fairly straightforward and simple. But in practice, the ability to switch between buildings, there is also the ability, Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, there will be the ability to share this experience with other people within a particular organization. Is that right?
That's correct. It is black matching, Michael, by the way.
Very good.
No, absolutely. So the idea is that at any point in time, and this is already available, you can invite any third party. The applicant themselves can invite a third party. What we think is very relevant is, as well, once the smart viewing is done, is then to share the link of the virtual tour with them so that they can actually spread it internally if they to the relevant individuals who have not been in the position to attend the smart viewing. And again, we have seen this quite often where the virtual tour is not made actually available publicly, but is only made available through the smart viewing platform and then shared once the lead is very much generated / qualified.
Mm-hmm. Which I feel that's something that we've been in this position quite a lot, whereby a deal is delayed by an unknown party within a particular company saying that, oh, my chairman needs to view the space, but he's in Hong Kong and not here for the next week and a half. So being able to actually share this experience with other people within an organization will allow us to overcome that quite quickly and easily.
And what we have seen as well even on the residential space is to do a similar smart viewing on that particular property with somebody else who couldn't actually attend at the same time. Mm-hmm. This is something that is actually quite frequent.
So whilst we wait for any, feel free to type in questions and bits and pieces like that. We're effectively about to go into the questions section, but I wanted to spend a few minutes just talking about a few aspects of the interface that are important to understand. So because we are doing this, because we are giving this access to the interface to operators without any restrictions, this can be used. We're not looking to corner the market in terms of only Flexioffices being able to do these viewings. So once you've uploaded the content and you're actually able to conduct smart viewings on your properties, you can use that to conduct viewings from any source. It doesn't have to be a Flexioffices viewing. It could be an office from one of our competitors. It can be a viewing from a commercial agent. It makes no difference. So we want this to be as widely adopted as possible. So we don't want to restrict it to only Flexioffices-led traffic. So I think that's quite important to mention. The other thing to mention is that the Flexioffices are effectively absorbing the development and the hosting of this interface. But I'm sure Marc will agree that as a long-term plan, Marc needs to make something out of this. Because it's his business. So we will look to make this interface free to use for as long as we can, whilst we understand the rate of adoption in the marketplace, which will also allow us to evaluate the pricing ban. We do know that it's going to be either a pay-per-use model or a model based on subscription, but we don't as yet have a firm number of what that might look like in terms of cost down the line. The main thing is for the time being, it's going to be free of charge for everybody to use and log on and test. So feel free. There are a few things to mention in terms of future developments on this interface. In early September, Marc, correct me if I'm wrong, the interface will be upgraded so that it can be made bespoke. So you can amend it to change colors, change logos, change the buttons, and effectively white label it to your own brand. So again, it's not going to carry a Flexioffices branding all over the place. This is going to be your brand colors. It's going to look like your interface for conducting viewings. We're also working on upgrading the portal so that it can accommodate a three-way interaction. We're very conscious that there is a high number of broker-led viewings, and the burden of proof, if you like, on a viewing completing virtually within a broker environment, especially when fee positions are concerned, needs to be substantiated by a three-way attended viewing. So I'm not quite sure exactly when that's going to hit the tape, Marc, but I should imagine it's going to be probably more like October-ish, November-ish. we'll keep you posted on that. The other thing the other thing I've realized in having lots of conversations with operators about this interface is that not everyone has the 3D walkthroughs available. So we are working on being able to offer that as a service, whereby Flexioffices would come in and digitize the floor plates for you. So I should have an update on that within the next couple of weeks. But we should be able to offer that service if it's of interest. And the final update that we are going to be looking at is converting this into an actual button on the website, on the Flexioffices website, that for those properties that have the virtual viewing capability, we will have a click-through that allows the customer to request a smart viewing, and indeed to create a schedule of smart viewings with the buildings that they like the look of. But fundamentally, I think the most important thing here is user participation. You know, like Marc said from the get-go, our main driver here is to make this interface the most user-friendly and the most relevant to the flex space sector. And in order for us to do that, we need feedback from operators using it day to day to understand how we can upgrade it and make it better so that it is the most fit for purpose vehicle there is out there.